History is rarely made with fanfare. It often arrives quietly, buried in the back pages of financial journals, until the consequences become impossible to ignore. Last week, such a moment occurred. It began with a bureaucratic decision in Abuja and ended with a threat of war from Washington. The Federal Republic of Nigeria, Africa's demographic and economic giant, made a sovereign determination regarding its natural resources. The government of President Bola Tinubu announced a policy of currency diversification. Nigerian oil, the lifeblood of its economy, would no longer be sold exclusively for United States dollars. The state would now accept the Chinese yuan, the euro, and the local naira. In a functional international system, this would be viewed as a routine adjustment of monetary policy. However, the reaction from the United States was not diplomatic. It was kinetic. President Trump responded not with trade negotiators, but with the explicit threat of military action. Let us pause to analyze the gravity of this equation. The world's preeminent military power threatened to bomb a sovereign nation, not for terrorism, not for invasion, not for human rights violations, but for the crime of accepting a different paper currency for its own exports. This is not the behavior of a confident superpower secure in its standing. It is the erratic, dangerous flailing of an empire witnessing the erosion of its foundation. The mask of benevolent leadership has slipped, revealing a fragile hegemony underneath. Why the dollar matters. To understand Washington's panic, one must understand the invisible architecture of American power. Since the mid-20th century, the global energy trade has effectively been a monopoly for the US dollar. This arrangement grants the United States what economists call an exorbitant privilege. Because the world needs oil, the world needs dollars. This artificial demand allows the United States to print currency without the risk of hyperinflation, to run deficits that would bankrupt any other nation, and to finance a global military apparatus essentially cost-free. The world, by trading in dollars, subsidizes the very empire that polices it. Nigeria's decision strikes at the heart of this system. Nigeria did not ban the dollar, they simply offered choice. But to a monopolist, competition is an existential threat. If Nigeria, a nation sitting on massive hydrocarbon reserves, can decouple its economic survival from the US dollar, it shatters the illusion of inevitability. It proves that the dollar is a currency, not a law of physics. Washington views this move as an act of economic aggression. Yet, a dispassionate analysis reveals that this moment was inevitable and entirely self-inflicted. For the last 20 years, American foreign policy has transformed the global financial system into a weapon of war. We have witnessed a systematic pattern: the freezing of Russian central bank reserves, the disconnection of Iranian banks from SWIFT, and the vanishing of Venezuelan assets from Western accounts. These actions sent a chilling, unmistakable signal to the global South. Your assets are safe only as long as you obey. By weaponizing the dollar, the United States taught its allies and partners a dangerous lesson. Dollar dependence creates vulnerability to American political coercion. Nigeria has been taking notes. They observe that in a unipolar world, economic sovereignty is the only shield against political capitulation. Washington is not witnessing an unprovoked shift. It is reaping the harvest of its own diplomatic overreach. The timing of this rupture is significant. Lagos has been observing the shifting geopolitical tides. The contrast between East and West has become stark. On one side, Chinese investment in Nigerian infrastructure has yielded tangible, concrete results: railways, power plants, and modernized ports. On the other, Western engagement has largely consisted of conditional promises and rhetorical support. Following the crisis in Ukraine, Europe found itself desperate for alternative energy supplies. Nigeria held the cards, but instead of merely opening the taps on European terms, Lagos demanded a new paradigm: technology transfers, majority ownership, and support for sustainable energy transitions. They stopped acting like a resource colony and started acting like a sovereign state. This shift in mentality is what terrifies the American establishment. It signifies the end of automatic deference. Nigeria is asserting a radical proposition: that the economic policy of Nigeria should be determined in Abuja, not in Washington, D.C. The military threat issued by President Trump exposes a profound intellectual bankruptcy at the core of American foreign policy. When a superpower's only response to economic competition is the threat of violence, it admits that its influence is no longer based on mutual benefit or attraction, but solely on fear. The international community is watching. They do not see strength in this threat. They see desperation. President Tinubu's response has been a study in asymmetric resistance. Calm, measured, and firm, he has refused to escalate rhetorically while quietly fortifying Nigeria's diplomatic position. Behind closed doors, a coalition is forming. Nigeria is leveraging the African Union for collective security, engaging with the BRICS nations, and communicating with European powers who are increasingly uncomfortable with American economic bullying. Nigeria cannot match the U.S. military dynamically, but it can make the diplomatic cost of conflict so exorbitantly high that Washington is forced to blink. We are living through the death throes of the unipolar moment. The era where American preferences automatically became global realities is over. We have entered a multipolar age. Nations now have options. China offers infrastructure without moralizing lectures. Russia provides energy cooperation without demands for regime change. India offers technological partnership without ideological strings. For a country like Nigeria, this is not about choosing a new master. It is about the liberation of having alternatives. If Nigeria succeeds in holding this line, the dam holding back global de-dollarization will burst. Saudi Arabia is already experimenting with yuan-denominated sales. Brazil and China are utilizing currency swaps. The BRICS expansion is creating a parallel financial architecture. Nigeria is not an isolated case. It is the leading edge of a global realignment. We must not overlook the human stakes of this crisis. Nigeria is a nation of over 200 million people, grappling with poverty, ethnic fractures, and the existential threat of climate change. For decades, Western policy has treated these challenges as leverage points, opportunities to pressure the government, rather than problems to solve. The West demands that Nigeria decarbonize, yet refuses to provide the financial support to do so, all while having built its own wealth on fossil fuels. It is a hypocrisy known as green colonialism. Nigeria is told to choose between economic development and environmental responsibility. By diversifying its currency and asserting control over its resources, Nigeria is rejecting this false choice. They are using current revenues to fund their own future, on their own timeline. The threat of American military intervention forces Nigeria to divert precious resources from development to security, turning a humanitarian and environmental challenge into a geopolitical weapon. There is a darker dimension to this standoff. If overt military threats fail to coerce Lagos, history suggests that covert destabilization will follow. Nigeria's internal fault lines, the religious divide between the Muslim North and Christian South, the tension between pastoralists and farmers, are ripe targets for external intelligence operations. When direct pressure fails, empires often resort to funding internal opposition or stoking separatist sentiments. The Nigerian intelligentsia is acutely aware of this. Civil society, academia, and the press are framing this struggle in explicitly post-colonial terms, drawing parallels to Patrice Lumumba and Thomas Sankara, leaders who prioritized national interest over Western demands and paid the ultimate price. However, this external pressure has had an unintended consequence. It has unified the Nigerian populace. By framing this as a battle for dignity and sovereignty, the Tinubu administration has secured a mandate that transcends internal divisions. The point of no return. We stand at a crossroads. Several scenarios lie ahead. Nigeria may continue its gradual decoupling, inspiring a cascade of similar moves across the global south. The U.S. may escalate to kinetic action, triggering a catastrophic collapse of global stability, or a prolonged standoff may ensue, normalizing a world where the dollar is just one of many options. Regardless of the immediate outcome, the psychological spell has been broken. For decades, economic coercion was the preferred, quiet tool of American hegemony. Nigeria has demonstrated that this tool is blunted. When a nation decides that dignity is worth the risk, and when alternatives exist to support that choice, the empire loses its leverage. In breaking the chains of the dollar, Nigeria has broken something far larger, the myth of inevitability. The world is watching, and they have seen that the emperor's mask has finally fallen away. The question now is not if the world order will change, but how painful the United States will make the transition.